All right, we're live. You ready, bro?
I'm ready.
Let's do it. Guys, this is Luke. Luke Richmond. He's a fucking nutter. I don't know why you do all the stuff you do, but it's fucking epic. I'm super excited to have this guy on here. So, Luke, well, I'll let you introduce yourself. Do you want to do that? Because I'll butcher it. So do you want to introduce yourself? And I'm going to share this right now on the stream community because there are fucking thousands of people there who want to hear from you. Introduce yourself. Tell us about you and what you've done. Just some of the things.
All right. Well, thanks for having me. Australian born and bred. I joined the military young, got out of the military fairly young after 4 years, and then took off overseas, got mixed into a bit of demon days type stuff with a bit of drug addiction, and then conquering that, I went on to sort of set up my life of adventure, sort of my dream life. And in the last number of years, I've climbed 6 of the biggest mountains on 6 continents, rode across the Atlantic Ocean 18 months ago in a rowboat, and walked across the Gobi Desert, dragging a cart full of all my food and water and supplies. And I also do the lovely sport of base jumping, if you've heard of that one. So
as you do.
I'm getting around.
That's absolutely nuts. Absolutely
trying to stay busy.
Yeah, and so Luke's done, a couple of things here and there. And so I heard about Luke's story. Luke's currently releasing his book, which I've got to put up the link to right now. What is the link? Do you have the link to the book? Yeah. I do. I'll just write it out. Is it a nice, easy link to follow, or a fucking ugly one? All right, it's fucking ugly. Okay, let's get on to then. So we'll copy that and we'll put that link in for you.
Yeah, perfect.
And guys, pretty much, Luke's written this book. It's called One Life, One Chance, and it details all of the most ridiculous, out there things that you've done, which is absolutely insane. I've never heard of anybody else doing all this sort of stuff. So yeah, there it is. I've bought a copy. So I'm fucking keen to get into it as well. But yeah, so guys, if you've got any questions for this bloke, ask away. This is a once in a lifetime opportunity because nobody's actually done the stuff that you've done. Nobody has rode across the Atlantic and crossed the Gobi Desert and done all your fucking mountain shit and all the other stuff that I can't even begin to describe. So this is really, really fucking wicked. I'm super excited for this. So yeah, get your questions in and we'll go from there. But first of all, who we got online? We've got Big Azar on here, Tommy Begley, Joe Chester, Kelly, Des Mac, how are you, mate? Duzzy Hughes, Ranjot, Kimberly, awesome. All right, we've got 20 people on now, so we're going to get cracking away. Mate, first of all, let's start off on the big one, the biggest fucking obstacle you've ever had to overcome. What do you say?
Well, it's a pretty easy one. I was still quite young, I was early 20s. I'd gotten out of the military. I wasn't lost. I mean, I wanted to get out of the military, but then I was sort of, I had no mission focus, So I sort of started traveling, started partying without very solid direction. And you just get into a crowd where you start partying a lot, drinking more and more. Start trying drugs, getting into that sort of stuff. I was in London, partying in Europe, doing these mad festivals that everyone, always dreamed about, getting right amongst it. But it's just a slippery slope with that stuff, and it just got me and took me too far.
Yeah. And
it just come to that cliched, rock bottom moment. I've just woke up in, I'll tell you about it. I woke up in prison, getting hosed down. I was in you have, you probably don't know, but you have blackout stages when you're on these sort of drugs for days at a time. So I was in a blackout stage, woke up in jail, getting hosed down by the police because I'd, shit yourself, you're covered in all your own filth, and it's just that typical rock bottom moment where, you check yourself, this is not where I wanted to be, this isn't how I was brought up. And lucky for me, I had a couple of really good mates from the army days who I could call when you're in these sort of situations. And I rang one of them the very next day when I got out of the lockup. And I said, Liam, mate, I've got to get out of here, I've got to get out of this whole scene, I'm in a bad way, where can I go? And my mate, who was well-travelled and done a lot of training overseas, he said, go to this place in Thailand called Tiger Muay Thai. And it was just a big Muay Thai training camp in the jungles of Phuket at the time. And I said, that's it, I'm going. And I booked my flights that day while I was still messed up. Flew out that day, started coming down as I was going through customs, and flew to Thailand. And from then on, mate, it was cold turkey, 6 hours a day of Muay Thai, destroying myself and, cleanse my body of all that terrible stuff and really changed my life at that moment. So from then on, my life went one way or the other, and it went to where I wanted to be. So you reawake that imagination in yourself, you start dreaming again, start focusing on what you really want out of life, and you're just in a new environment with fitness-oriented people and health, and then I just started planning adventures. I wanted to get into this adventure stuff that I've been reading about my whole life.
And that's how it started. Just as soon as you decided, fuck this shit, I'm sick of waking up pissed or whatever in fucking jail cell.
Yep.
That was the moment you're like, nah, I'm doing it. And then you went off to Thailand, and that's where it all started.
That's where it all started, mate. That was 2010 when the training camps in Phuket were sort of at the embryonic stage. Got in there, sorted myself out, and now I don't know if anyone's been to Thailand training over there. There's somewhere I go every year now, and I've worked at all the big camps. It's huge there now. Fitness is mecca right now. It's all about,
Yeah. And so, what made you want to row across the fucking Atlantic?
Right.
The fucking it's a big pond, the Atlantic. It's not like your average.
It's 6,500 kilometres. So 6,500 k's. It was 55 days, but it came about in Thailand. I was actually working at a place called Unit 27, a big training camp there, and a team of like British Special Forces guys were over training at the camp, and I just hit it off with the boys, ex-military myself. We just got on really well. So I'm training up to go and row the Atlantic, these guys, to set this new record. And I said to them when they were leaving, look, boys, I hope nothing goes wrong with your team, but if something does happen, I'd love to be involved in what you're doing. I was really jealous about the adventure they were going to do.
You'd love to do that.
Love
what the fuck, mate? I don't like doing 6 reps at the gym.
But this is how funny it is. That team of these boys ended up in a town in Portugal called Lagos. And now that's the starting point for the Atlantic crossing. They met another team that was going to row across the Atlantic in a bar. And this team that they met had just lost a team member for appendicitis. So that night when they met, they're like, hold on, I've got a guy for you. Put my hat into the ring, and they called me up the next day. We had a good Skype chat with me and the other 3 members of this team. Hit it off. I agreed to it. I asked the missus at the time whether I could go after I'd agreed to it. And she goes, yep, go for it. So I quit my job. 3 days later, flew to London, and 10 days after that, took the first strokes out into the Atlantic. So it was 2 weeks from agreeing when I voyaged off.
so obviously, I mean, it's pretty stupid of me to say this, but it was very, very physically taxing. How much did you change, like physique-wise, over that time when you were rowing?
Well, that's the thing. The rowing roster, because there's 4 of us on this boat. It was 8 meters long. It's about not even as wide as this table. It's really low to the water, and it has 2 tiny little cabins on either end that are good for 1 person, really jammed into 2, and they're like little safety hatches, right? So we'd row for 2 hours, rest for 2 hours, row for 2 hours, 24 hours a day, and it took us 55 days to cross the ocean. So in that time, I lost just under 15 kilograms, and the body is such an amazing thing. Hey, look, it adapts. So it just chewed all the muscle that's not getting used. So your pecs, your ass, all that stuff that's good for the beach, no good in the ocean, disappeared in the first couple of weeks, and then your body just. Mate, it gets destroyed, hey? Yeah. You end up with salt sores all over you, little infections all over you, because you don't have fresh water for bathing for that entire time. Yeah, 55 days, but we got there. We set a new route across the Atlantic. This team were the first mixed team to go from mainland Europe to mainland South America, and it was brutal. I'm not going to lie, it was absolutely brutal, but it was amazing as well.
Without betting it up too much, how many times do you actually think we're going to die? Because let's be honest, waves aren't like little, you know what I mean? You're going to get some massive swells.
There was this one point, we had 2 big storms during our row, and when the storms hit, you throw out a thing called a drogue anchor, which sort of hooks the boat into the underwater currents to keep you straight into the waves, because you don't want to get flipped end over end. But the boat can be rolled, it can be pushed down underwater, and it'll pop up and right itself, because we've got airtight little cabins. But there was one point when we were getting pumped by these big 20-footers, and 20-foot waves breaking onto the deck, and it was just terrible conditions. We're trying to row out of this area in the Canary Islands where water's a bit shallower and it pumps up the waves bigger, so we had to get out of there if we were going to get out of the situation. And it was my turn back on shift. Now I thought I knew at the exact point, I'm going in. We're going to capsize, I'm going in for sure. So I put on my life jacket, put on my safety beacon, hooked into the safety lines, beanie on, jackets on, and then I was saving this big tub of Nutella. And I thought, fuck it, I'm going into the ocean here. We might not make it through this day. That's where I thought we were at. So I just hooked this whole tub of Nutella. And so if I'm going in like happy. And then I went out and rode it. That was it. But we made it through. Like we had capsized a little bit, but we didn't get pumped. We got out of there.
Just a little bit.
So the wave will sort of break. It pushes you right onto your side. The water drains off, like frothy water up to your neck, and then you're good. But you stay locked into the safety lines the whole time. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Epic.
Epic. Yeah, sounds like a good holiday.
Yeah. It was a memorable one.
100%. So after that, so you completed the 55 days,
Yeah.
After that, what was the next one you went on to do?
Right. So after that, actually, my new wife and I had decided we wanted to go and cross a desert. So it sort of come out of the blue, and I probably didn't let my body recover enough from the ocean before we went and did this one, because this one knocked me around. So we decided on the Gobi Desert. We built some carts that could drag, we had 88 kilos of food, tents, supplies, gas, everything we needed to go from the western edge of the Gobi Desert in Mongolia to the eastern edge. And we did that crossing in 57 days, covering 1,805 kilometers. And testament to our relationship, we were in a tent together for 57 days and we didn't fight. So I think we've got a solid one going on. Yeah.
Pretty good girl,
yeah. But that trip broke me even more, like physically, my knees, my hips, and everything else, because I'd just come off the road. It was only 9 months later when I hit this desert. And that repetitive movement, as all of you guys know from training, if you do one thing over and over and over and over again without recovery and rest, you're going to blow yourself out. So that dragging movement for days on end just annihilated my hips and knees. So how long's it been now? Almost 9 months to recover fully from that experience. But it was just a different part of the world, hey, like fully desolate. But people do live out there. Like we had to pick up wells every 3 to 4 days. And nomads live everywhere. There's little gers, goats, camels, and a little family would be every 100 Ks. And we had to find these guys because they would have the well. And the well could be, as big as your dinner plate, just covered with a rock. And you wouldn't be able to find it unless you found the nomads. They'll push us on to where the water is and we could fill up our water.
And they were happy for you to do that?
They were the absolute best, hey? Or we couldn't communicate with them. But every little family we came across in that whole time would try and give us something. So even if they were absolutely poor, they'd come out and give us a homemade goat's milk biscuit or, this one time, it was a terrible day. We're pushing through sand all day, and this nomad family, they were a little bit wealthier. They had a vehicle. They pulled up next to us. They had cooked an entire goat. They brought it over, pulled up next to our carts, got us to stop, sat us down on the blanket, had tea, goat, and the whole family and us, and they just fed us just because they just wanted to help us out. It was unbelievable. It was the best thing. Like goat's horrendous to eat anyway, but it was the best thing you've ever eaten in your life at that stage. It was unbelievable. I was chewing things off the bones. It was great.
How many calories were you on per day when you were walking?
Mate, we were trying to punch in as much as we could, but it's that balance between weight you can pull and how much extra weight is going to chew more calories and just be that, just digging yourself into a grave type scenario. So we're trying to eat 3,000 to 4,000 if we could in the meals we had, and that just wasn't enough. It wasn't enough for me. For my wife Elise, she's a bit smaller. It was just enough for her. So she only lost over the trip, I think 4 kilos. Yeah. But she recovered well and she was fine. I dropped 10, and it annihilated me. The lack of fats and all that stuff in that diet just ruined my knees and hips, and it's taken a long time to recover. But that was during the first half where I lost all that weight. In the second half, we started to find bigger villages. So little villages of, a few hundred people, and they'd have a tiny little shop because they were close to a road system. And they'd have like bread, butter, Coca-Cola in these little shops, and I'd smash a lot. I go in there and buy 3 loaves of bread, 2 tubs of butter, every can of Coke they had, and just sit out the front and just hoof the stuff. Just because you like eating the butter. Just trying to get those calories in.
How did you feel after eating that?
Oh, you go up like a rocket, and then about 20 minutes later, you just plummet back to earth. Especially with Coca-Cola, because I don't drink it, in normal life. And when you punch it over there, it just shoots you up, brings you down. You get nauseous with all those fats in there, which you haven't, had for quite a while. But you just know your body needed it. How to get it in.
That's wicked. How many hours a day were you walking?
So we tried to do, in the beginning, we got 6Ks our first day, and it broke us. The carts were 160 kilograms to start with, and the axle had 4 wheels, so it's distributed well, and depending on the terrain, you can move along pretty good. But if it's rocky, sandy, then it gets hard. So we did 6Ks the first day, but by the end, we were doing 40K days. So the weight of the cart had come down, conditions had improved a bit, our own conditioning was got up to the task, and we could do, we'll be on 6 90-minute blocks in the course of a day, and trying to get 40Ks a day. It was monotonous.
So guys, when I give you cardio, stop whinging, all right? Luke's done it much harder than you, and he's not complaining, is he? Man, that's insane. So how long was that?
It was 57 days.
57 days.
So that was my longest trip so far.
Right.
And with these long trips, it turns into, like, the body will adapt to anything. The body can do anything you want it to do, as long as your mind can carry it there.
Yeah.
And on any given day on these sort of trips, you could have a real positive day where everything's good and your imagination is just going off on tangents, and the day goes by in a second.
Yeah.
And then the following day, you could be in this negative spiral that just chews you up all day, and that day feels like a week.
Yeah.
And little things that you're doing, like flicking your fingers, would drive me insane, and it turns into the biggest thing on the planet. Real bad days. Yeah. And you just have to sort of just ride that wave of emotion across a big, long trip like that.
Yeah. That's wicked.
Yeah.
And so the next one after that, you started. Well, I'm not sure if I'm getting this out of order, but you started climbing mountains.
No, that was first.
That was first.
Yeah, the mountains were first. So that was my first trip.
I need to read the book, don't I?
Yeah. That's like the first few chapters. No, mountains were first, brother. I've always had an obsession when I was younger, reading adventure books. And it was always about Everest and Hillary and polar explorers. So I wanted to start climbing mountains, and I hit 6 of these mountains. The 7 summits was the goal. I conquered 6 of them, which was the biggest mountain on each continent, so 6 continents. Yep. With Everest to go, so I still got to do Everest. But those mountains were all different parts of the world. You go the biggest in Antarctica, biggest in South America, North America, Africa. So you get to travel a lot, and each one taught me different things. And mountaineering is such a different sport to long endurance events, because it's technical climbing, you're carrying loads up and down a mountain, the weather plays a massive role. Summer days are huge, battling extreme cold. All the trips are different, and they all taught me lessons.
How'd your mentality change after each one?
Mate, depending on the trip, like if you had a very successful trip where nothing went wrong and the weather just played ball and you summited and everything's good, you leave confident in your abilities, in your direction, and the next objective. But we had a trip in South America to climb Aconcagua where we were 3 days from going on our summit day. So we'd been up and down this mountain. We were in day 17 or 18, and a big storm came in. And during this day, a Spanish team were going for summit. And the storm had come in that quick and unexpectedly that it caught this whole team out in the open. And they got disorientated in the whiteout. The temperatures plummeted. They weren't prepared for it, and these guys died. So then 3 days later, we're pushing to the summit. We had heard what had happened, but then on this one particular ridge where we stopped to have a breather after the first couple of hours on our 12-hour summit day, the first 2 hours, one of the climbers is frozen on the side of the trail and wrapped in a silver blanket, mate, So at that point, you question everything. Like you question your ability, you question why I'm even bloody here. I mean, that guy that's lying there, dead, could have been experienced, climbed every mountain on the planet, 10 years experience, something. Who am I to be here trying to do this? And that's when you really ask the tough questions of yourself, and you go back to, have I trained for it? Have I prepared well? Do I have the right guy leading me into this, who knows this mountain, who knows the weather? At the end of the day, you just got to back yourself and go for it. Yeah. And know the risks. These are the risks for doing these things. Yeah.
I'm probably not going to give that a go, eh?
Start small.
Start small. I might start doing cardio, first of all. And now base jumping.
This one come out of the blue. I mean, for base jumping, for people that don't know what base jumping is, we all know what skydiving is. So base jumping just took skydiving to the lower altitudes, jumping off cliffs, buildings, bridges, and antennas. That's the whole philosophy of base. And I had an ex-army buddy who got into the sport, and watching his videos and all that type of stuff, you get very excited. Like, it looks like a really cool sport. So I hit him up, so mate, I want to maybe try this out. It looks like something I'd get into. And he goes, okay, if you want to do that, you got to go skydiving. So your first thing you have to do, you got to get up there and start skydiving, get up hundreds of jumps, which is a massive hurdle. an expensive sport, it's time consuming, but it's so important. Once I'd done that, I called up the same buddy, so mate, I'm ready for my first base jump. He took me to a place in America called Parent Bridge in Twin Falls, which is in Idaho. And that's where you go to learn. So bridges are big, they're high, they're safe because there's nothing really you can hit. You have what we call off headings. So you don't open straight. If you open back, there's no cliff to hit. So you learn on a bridge, and that's where I did my first base jump. Walking out, when you walk out of a bridge normally, yeah, it's fine. You don't even get scared. Yeah. When you're walking out knowing you're about to jump off it, when you reach the center, you're walking out like this. You're like, holy shit. Yeah. And this thing's high. It's like a few hundred meters. It's massive. And you get there, you do all your checks, and then you've got to climb over the rail. You put your leg over, you grip this thing like your life depends on it, climb over, then you've got to turn around, face out away from the bridge, lean out away, and then off you go. And it's dead air, so it's not like a skydive where you got that 200 kilometer an hour wind velocity. You're just falling and you get that gut-wrenching couple of seconds off before your parachute opens. So that was the first one, and then from there it's just progressed on the cliffs, and I just got my first antenna. I can't tell you where because it was illegal, but I just got my first antenna a couple of weeks ago.
So you jumped on one of those big fucking antenna
Yeah,
poles.
well, they're not big, they're so low. They're like 170 feet, or so like 50-some meters. The ground's right there, so you do what they call a static line jump. So you're actually tying your parachute to the antenna with brake cord. So when you jump, it'll pull your chute out and then brake away so it can open. So it's a different sort of setup, but it needs to open straight away.
So why did you decide to jump off an antenna?
Just because that's the last thing in base. So base, B-A-S-E, is buildings, antennas, span, and earth. And you have to hit all four to, call yourself a base jumper. So
Yeah.
That was the last one. But I think it'd be my only one. Yeah. It's a bit low. It's a bit low. It was good. That sport, like, it teaches you not control your fear, just to harness it a little bit better. It's still there. So every time I still go jump today, when you get on that edge, you're still shaking. Yeah. You're still shaking, you get on the edge, but then you go through your mental checklist. Like, right, I've packed my parachute well, it took me an hour. Conditions are good, the winds are good, you do a little spit check, you're like, right, I'm perfect, helmet's on, cameras on, everything's good. Once you've gone through that whole checklist, the hands stop shaking, no more fear, and you want to jump out into that space. Mm. It's a fully liberating feeling. It's amazing. Yeah. Don't recommend it to anybody though. Don't do it. It's one of those things, you got to find your own way there. Don't recommend it.
Is there anything else you've done that we haven't touched on yet that you want to cover?
Mate, that's all the big stuff. I've got another mountain to do this year back in Nepal called Amadablam. It's going to be absolutely epic. It's like a 7,000 meter ice giant. And next year, which I've just got a few sponsors for, I'm going to have a crack at kayaking the whole Amazon River. I'll be the first Aussie to have a crack at that. So that'll be June next year. So we'll see how we go. Yeah. No more walking trips now. Having biceps.
Guys, if you've got any questions for Luke, ask him now. Okay, it takes a little bit of time for him to come through. I'm just going to chat with Luke now a bit about mentality and the shit he's learned, because, well, I think you've learned a thing or two over the last couple of years of doing insane stuff. We're going to go over that, but if you've got any questions, ask them away now, comment them up, and then we'll hit them at the end, okay? So, mate, obviously, as I said, you've learned a few things. What is the number one thing that you've learned, I guess, about yourself through doing all these trips so far and all this stuff?
There's probably two things.
Yeah.
There's two things. The first one is this confronting death. Like when you see stuff like we saw in the mountains, or when you're in the base jumping community where death is a real thing. Like, it happens quite often in the sport. It's very in your face, and you know that every time you jump, it could be your last jump. You factor in death as a real thing. And I think that's something we miss out on in normal life. We think we're going to live for 100 years, and we plan our lives to be 100 years, and we end up living a certain type of life. Because I've been confronted with death so many times, I've sort of tailored my life accordingly. So now I sort of plan my life in just 5-year blocks. What if I was to die? What if in 5 years that was it? I'm done. What am I going to do with my next 5 years? And that's sort of how I plan my structure these days. No, it's not for everybody, but I'd say to everyone, ask yourself that question. If you knew your clock's going to get punched in 5 years' time, what are you going to do in the next 5 years? And in answering that, it'll give you a good direction on what you really want out of life. So that's one thing that I've definitely learned is to be real about death.
Yeah.
It's not fake, it's real, and live your life accordingly, right? The next one, which I learned on the Atlantic Road, was being grateful for the suffering. So suffering is part and parcel with these big trips. You get into days, weeks, months of being so uncomfortable, it's excruciating. The mental drain, physical, your skin deteriorates. That's what I call the suffering, right? And I came up with a little mantra when I was on the row, and I actually had it on the little cabin of the boat. And it was, be grateful, you deserve this, thank you for allowing me to suffer. And that little mantra was just about, no matter how hard we do it out there on these things we're trying to achieve, it's a privilege. Yeah. And at any one moment, there could be 1 billion people out there that would trade their lives for that suffering any day of the week. And when I think like that, and when I put that mantra into my head, it really helps me get through those times. You sort of just go, oh, you're right, and just let's have it. Let's just get some suffering going. And then you start to be grateful for it. It's like, all right, let's get into it, So you just trick your brain, and then your body will just follow suit.
Is that why you continue to do it? I mean, obviously, initially this was to help you get over drug addiction. Yeah. So why do you keep doing it? Why continue going through all of this, in these insane adventures?
I get asked that one a bit. I guess I haven't found my absolute limit yet. So I haven't found that point where I am absolutely done. So I've done some very, very tough things, so absolutely brutal things where you think, this is it. But I haven't been pushed to that point where I think this is my absolute limit.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can find that. Maybe it's just a thing we'll never get. But for now, I'm still going to keep chasing that. So my trips are just going to get bigger and longer until I find some sort of climax with it.
Yeah. How close are you going to push it to death?
Mate, you got to run that fine line of risk. And base jumping is a great sport to weigh that up. So with base jumping, there's jumps where if one thing goes wrong, you could die. Yeah. And a lot of guys jump those jumps because 99% of the time, if you've done everything correctly, you'll be fine. Yeah. But there was a jump just now in this location that I won't mention where we were assessing a jump. If everything went good, it was going to be fine. We could have landed it safely. But if one thing went wrong, I knew with my ability I would have been in a bad situation, injury or death. So we walked away from it. And that was after a 5-hour drive to get there. So you run the fine line of death, even though the sport you're doing has a consequence of serious injury or death. There's no way out with base. But you can still find a margin there. Yeah. And so you can still weigh up a risk and do a very, very risky, dangerous trip safely. Yeah. If that makes sense.
Yeah, gotcha. It's calculated.
Calculated, yeah. And everyone's different how they weigh it up. Some people just run it closer to the edge than others.
Yeah. And that would be useful enough, won't it?
Hopefully not. Hopefully not.
Kelly's just asked, do you have a normal job to support all these activities? And if so, what is it? Or are you just sponsoring?
Good question. So I did have gyms. So I had gyms here in Sydney where, the daily grind, small business, as you know, it's a tough one. Yep. And was earning decent money and living that life that, me as a normal adult wanted. You wanted the nice views and the cars and everything else. But I just didn't have the happiness. And that's when I knew that my wife, Elise, was actually going to be my wife, because I turned to her and said, look, I'm just not happy. How would you feel about selling up the businesses and going back to Thailand and just working in the training camps there and just being a bit happier and healthier? And she said yes straight away. So that's when I knew, she's the one for me. And so we gave away that sort of life, but we did have a little kitty there after selling the businesses. That went on the first couple of adventures. But now we work for about 6 months of the year over in Thailand. Elise runs a bit of an online business, and I work in the training camps, which is fantastic because I get to coach big classes of beginners every day, and people from all over the world you get to meet and expand your network. Yeah. And then when the big trips come along, I get sponsors. Yeah. So I get corporate sponsorship for 30, 50, 60, whatever the cost is to do these trips. Yeah. I have to get corporate sponsors for that.
That's how much 30, 50, 60K?
Oh, more. Yeah. The Atlantic Row, if I had to contribute big time for that one, cost that team about £150,000. The desert cost us about 30 grand. The Amazon Clark next year is stacking up to be about 40. But these are huge operations, big time, big money, big logistics. So then when you approach corporations for this stuff, it's not about my passion and all this type of stuff. They don't care. It's business. So now it's about a return on investment for what they're going to give me.
Yeah.
So for what they're giving me, they're going to get the speaking engagements. They're going to get the branding on the kayaks and the tents and all that stuff. They're going to get mentioned in the books. So you give them a return on investment for that media money.
Yeah.
And with that media money, I'll go do something real cool with it. You know, we always try and raise money for charities along the way, which is separate from the corporate sponsorship. That comes from single donations from people. So we always raise money. So you get to do some good stuff as well. But ultimately, you just get to have your dream, my type of dreams, you know, being out there suffering for a few months, realised with the corporate dollar. So, yeah, that's how we get that done.
Will you ever go back to working in a normal job? Could you?
Mate, I don't think so. I don't think so. I enjoy working in Thailand. Yeah, the money's not great, but over there you can live so cheap that the money's good. And I like that environment because it's very flexible. They let us come and go. When a trip's on, we can go. With the cost of living and the way life is in Australia, I love this country and I'll always be back here. It's my base. But to go back to a normal job, probably not. Yeah.
What is your big goal? The biggest thing you want to achieve?
Mate, how do you weigh up the bucket list? I think it's going to be a polar journey. So when I was younger, when I mentioned reading all the adventure books, a lot of those books were about the first polar explorers to the Antarctic.
Yeah.
So I've got in my mind, which will be a horrendously expensive trip, to sail to Antarctica, do a solo traverse of the entire continent, and then sail away as well.
Yeah.
So that sort of trip is what, over all these years of expeditions and networking and corporations and all the hustle, I hope is leading to.
Yeah.
Because that's going to be a $500,000 ticket to achieve that.
Yeah.
You know, so we'll get there one day.
One day.
Maybe a few
One
years.
day.
Maybe a few books away.
I'd like to sell a few more programs and start sponsoring you, mate.
Please buy some books.
Frankie's just trying to just ask, what do you eat for race day? I think Frank, Luke doesn't race, Luke survives.
Yes.
So what will you eat? What are the types of foods that you'll eat while you are going away?
Great question. Like, ideally, to bring down that cost so you don't have to get so much corporate sponsorship, you try and eat local. But when you eat local, depending on where you are in the world, that could just mean rice and beans with a bit of bushmeat or whatever you got going around. So if we had the finances, we try and take along dehydrated foods, lightweight, calorie-dense foods. If we're going to cold environments like Alaska or Antarctica, we take along bricks, like blocks of bacon, butter, anything to get big calories in. You can take all that stuff because it's frozen all the time because it's minus 30 all the time. And they're good trips because you can cook a lot better for yourself because you're dragging sleds on ice that move better, type of scenarios. If you're trying to move through an environment where you've got to carry everything on your back, then it's a different scenario. You have to live local, eat local, and just cop the consequences of what that's going to do to your body.
Yeah. Right.
So you just got to make do. Good question.
Dude, this has been epic. This is fucking one of the most insane, probably the most insane story I've ever heard in my life. I don't know why you do this. I don't know why, but it's fucking cool. It's awesome. I'm excited to hear about the next one, guys. If you haven't already, click on that link. All right, there's a big buy now where you can go and get Luke's book. Oh, let's tell him about how you're getting around on your book tour. We haven't even fucking discussed that. That's the biggest one of all. So Luke's doing a book tour just for releasing this book, which he's written. Mate, tell us about how you're getting around.
Right, so the publishers wanted me to go around and visit all the book tours that are stock in the book. I thought, oh yeah, that's pretty cool, but I'll put my own spin on it as well. So I wanted to make it a little bit of an adventure. So what I'm going to do, starting Thursday morning, I'm going to get 50 books from the publisher in a bag. I'm going to take no money. I'm going to get to the outside of Sydney, and then I'm going to hitchhike to all the little towns in New South Wales, Victoria, and Queensland that I have to visit on selling a book a day. So I have to sell a book a day to survive, and I'm going to hitchhike the whole way. And during that time, I'm offering out my talks to anybody that wants to have me into their gym, their backyard barbecue, whatever, to have me come along, speak, they've just got to feed me and hopefully buy a book. So that's my little strategy for a book tour that could last probably 5 weeks. Yeah. And that starts on Thursday.
So you're going to live off $23 a day?
If I can sell one, yeah. If I can sell one.
Well, I bought one. And then who else? Jess Mack has just bought one as well.
Thank you so much.
So there we go. We've got 2 days started, mate. How about that? A little bit of cash in the kitty. And yeah, guys, if you haven't already, jump on, get into it. Rod, the name of the guy in blue, that's Luke. All right. Watch this live video again, mate. It's probably one of the coolest interviews I've ever done in my fucking life. So jump on now, get this fucking book, okay? You will want to read this. It is something that nobody else has done this ever. No, nobody has done all these things, have they? Ever. No, they haven't. Yeah, it is very much unique. So jump on right now and get it. Have a look. And if you guys have joined in late, watch the rest of this live video again because it's absolutely next level. All right. Big Bart, thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Pleasure.
Appreciate it.
See you soon, guys. Take it easy.